It's Halloween! Well, actually, Halloween month. But why not celebrate it by looking at the scariest games of all time? In fact, this list was so hard and so scary that I had to make it more than just a top 10. So this is the top 15 scariest games of all time. Well, keep in mind, this isn't a list of the best horror games. You know, number one on this list is not my favorite game of these 15 games. It's just what I find to be the scariest. Also, one game per franchise, or else this whole list would be made up of like Resident Evil, Dead Space, Silent Hill, and Amnesia. Anyways, without further ado, let's get started. But before we get there, you know what to do. Should like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell, leave a comment, or I will scare you to death. However that works. Let's not find out. Just subscribe to the channel, alright? Almost to 500.
Number 15. Burger King foot lettuce. The last thing you'd want in your Burger King burger is someone's foot fungus, but as it turns out, that might be what you get.
When you clicked on this video, you probably expected a game from a franchise that rhymes with Violent Bill. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because there have been non-stop rumors that developer Bloober Team is making a new game in that franchise, and well, I'll believe it when I see it. But if that is true, that should be very exciting, seeing how scary they made Layers of Fear. This is a psychological horror game where you play as a mentally disturbed artist who is just trying to paint his own masterpiece, but keeps getting distracted. These distractions include puzzles and the mansion continuously changing. As our protagonist gets distracted, you are right there with him as the mansion just changes and bizarre shit is happening. You are kind of on the edge of your seat. Not to mention, Layers of Fear has some nice jump scares, and considering how it asks us to go inside of the mind of our protagonist and evaluate what is real and what isn't, it just makes Layers of Fear all the more chilling.
This November, California voters will decide if they wish to spend billions to help fund the work. Proposition 14.
I've noticed a new-ish genre of online horror movie games. You know what I mean? We got games like The Evil Dead and the Predator game. That one sucks. I kind of like the Evil Dead game, though. And we're also getting a Texas Chainsaw Massacre game and a Killer Clowns from Outer Space game. And later this month, we are getting a Ghostbusters game. And I mean, Ghostbusters isn't a horror film, but it's going to be similar to these other horror movie games. But the one to really start this trend, I feel, was the Friday the 13th game, and that one does it very well because of how spooky it is. You can either play as Jason, hunting down and trying to kill the 4 camp counselors, or you can play as the 4 camp counselors, trying to hide from Jason and waste his time. And yeah, I do mean wasting his time, not beating him. And while it is certainly fun playing as Jason, playing as the camp counselors adds a level of dread and suspense. Hiding from Jason Voorhees in this game is like watching them hide from him in the movies. Running, hiding, fearing for your lives, and the even scarier thing is, you're going to die. In this game, you can't beat Jason. True to the movies, if you are a camp counselor, he's going to kill you. But you could waste his time, but that's beyond the point. The point is that Friday the 13th is a frightening game because it's one of few games on this list where you will die in the game. Jason's gonna kill you. One interesting genre of video games is a, like, you know, choose your own adventure kind of game, you know? One where you can actually decide what happens and say, like, the ending is actually very dependent on what decisions you make. But there's one game that does this and makes it scary, and that game is Until Dawn. The story is interesting as it takes inspiration from many slasher films such as Halloween or, I was just talking about it, Friday the 13th, but then becomes more fantastical. What else is interesting is that you follow an ensemble cast of characters in this game, and they make stupid decisions you see characters in most horror films make. So Until Dawn feels the most like a horror movie than just about any of the other games on this list, and I mean that in a great way. This cast of characters, by the way, makes the game feel even more stressful, because throughout the game, you are the one making the decisions that affect the story, and you are trying to keep them alive. This adds a layer of unpredictability to Until Dawn and keeps you at the edge of your seat, because you grow attached to these characters, and they can die, and it could be your fault. Not to mention, the jump scares are very solid too. Until Dawn is one of the best and most unique PS4 exclusives, and a very spooky one too.
Wait. Alright, that's cool.
Frictional games. You'll hear their name later with a franchise that is very scary, and if you know, you know. But in 2015, they actually came out with a game that managed to be frightening. I'm of course talking about Soma. In Soma, you control sentient robots in an underwater research facility. It's mostly a puzzle game, but also a stealth game, as you spend most of the game sneaking around enemies and solving puzzles. The thing about Soma, though, is that the atmosphere is incredibly unsettling in the best way possible. The way you sneak around certain robots trying not to get caught by them, it's honestly terrifying, seeing how easily they can kill you. Not to mention, it has some nasty body horror, in addition to the suspense throughout the game, and you got one frightening game in Soma.
Number 11. Your father will die.
Limbo is a game not for the faint of heart. I mean, let's be real, look at it. And Playdead know how to make some games scary and unnerving. That being said, their next game after Limbo, Inside, is even scarier and even more unnerving. The thing about Inside, and I guess I can throw Limbo into this as well, is how the game conveys suspense and horror with no dialogue or even that much sound, really. Inside manages to be frightening by being silent. But also, you play as a little boy in this visually dark dystopian world while running from many security machines and hunting dogs. Those dogs, by the way, if and when they come up to you, you move away from them ASAP. Not to mention, the boy can actually die, say if the player messes up, of course. And when that happens, it is in an even more terrifying and honestly somewhat realistic manner. Inside is on this list mainly because of the boy, who honestly adds a level of dread to this game. And again, doing all this through pure silence is an impressive feat and makes Inside one of the most chilling games ever.
I wanted to give to you, in the last part of your notes here, the significance spiritually of the number 10 in the Bible.
Shinji Mikami, known for his work on a franchise that rhymes with Resident Evil, and because of that, any horror game he works on is bound to be a frightening one. Case in point, The Evil Within. And honestly, it does share a lot of similarities with that other franchise I may or may not have mentioned, as it is a third-person horror game, but you know what? I don't mean that in a bad way. However, The Evil Within is more psychological and disturbing, with some crazy jump scares, body horror, and excellent creature designs, and also, not to mention, stealth segments that leave you on the edge of your goddamn seat. Not to mention, the story is also very intriguing, with 3 cops investigating a mass murder scene, but then get thrown into a bizarre and creepy world of creatures and shit. With the overall dark tone and atmosphere, along with everything else I just said, The Evil Within shows that Shinji Mikami knows how to be scary. One of the most iconic horror franchises is Fatal Frame. Maybe in Japan, more so. And I noticed a lot of horror franchises become more action-based. Not much of an issue, but I feel Fatal Frame has stayed scary from the beginning to its most recent entry. That being said, being the scariest game in this franchise is quite the feat. And that feat is achieved by Fatal Frame 2: Crimson Butterfly. In this game, you go around an abandoned village taking pictures. Not too spooky, but then the village has a very scary atmosphere. What is even more spooky is instead of running away from the ghosts and hiding from them, which is what you want to do in most of the other games on this list, you actually have to confront them. That makes Fatal Frame 2 a uniquely spooky game, as it kind of has you do the opposite of what most scary games do. But on top of that, the game even starts to feel a little more personal, and even suspenseful, with the main character's sister being in trouble. Fatal Frame 2: Crimson Butterfly is not the scariest game of all time, as seen by its placement on this list, but having to actually confront the ghosts makes this one uniquely spooky, and while not number 1 as I just said, number 9.
So I'm going to be giving this flavor 8.5 out of 10 scoops.
We all like detectives, right? I'm actually a detective myself, remember? Don't worry, I'll try to bring him back. But want to know a spooky detective game? Condemned Criminal Origins. In Condemned Criminal Origins, you play as Ethan Thomas, an SCU investigator, who is studying and analyzing crime scenes to catch serial killers. Sounds simple enough, but the game has a metro setting, and it's visually dark and gritty and eerie. Even more chilling though, Ethan gets visual hallucinations, which again makes the game even spookier, and leaves the player wanting Ethan to just snap out of it. Snap my fingers there. And on top of that, those hallucinations get more and more unsettling as they happen. Not to mention, this game also has some crazy good jump scares, as well as some seriously disturbing visual horror. And as for the world, it feels genuinely lived in, which makes the game feel even more horrifying. It's fair to say that Condemned Criminal Origins is not for the faint of heart.
36.
Very close, but that's not it. Let's go to Gary the Retard. What number between 2 and 4?
7.
Nintendo, the same company responsible for Mario and Pokemon, Kirby, Pikmin, Animal Crossing, and Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. I'm sure many of you didn't even know Nintendo made a horror game, or even a rated M game. However, Eternal Darkness manages to be both, of course. I mean, what kind of horror game is it if it's not rated M? It's kind of hard to do that, actually. Why is Eternal Darkness so spooky, though? Well, obviously, the game has many jump scares, and the atmosphere and the tone is very chilling. But the reason Eternal Darkness is this high is because of its sanity effects. What I mean by that is that the game basically fucks with the player, telling you stuff like your memory card has been corrupted, changing TV inputs, wiping your inventory, and the game freezing for a couple of seconds, then unfreezing with no explanation, making you think that like your game is lagging or whatever. You want to put your player on edge? You make a spooky game with a spooky setting, story, and enemies, but you want to make the player paranoid in the best way possible? You do what Eternal Darkness does, and constantly make the player think that something is wrong with their game.
Okay, Mrs. Puff, what's my final score?
6.
Woo!
Okay, name a horror movie franchise. Go on. Yeah, I'm giving you time. Okay, you've had enough time, and I'm sure that at least one of you, definitely more than one, but at the very least one of you, said Alien. And really, Alien should translate very well to video games, but none of them really brought anywhere near the level of dread that the original movie did until Alien Isolation. Similar to Ridley Scott's masterful horror film Alien, Alien Isolation is a more claustrophobic and atmospheric horror title. This game is stressful. You as the player are constantly on edge, looking over your shoulder, afraid that the alien will appear, and when it appears, you're kind of fucked. You are a powerless human getting attacked by an alien. See you later. Not to mention, little fact about the aliens in this game, the AI is programmed to learn how you play. It'll catch on to your patterns and will come up with ways to surprise you, making it even harder to escape the alien. Alien Isolation is the Alien game fans of the franchise were clamoring for years, and few games in general managed to get your heart beating faster than this one.
Oh, chills. Literal chills.
It was number 5. Number 5 killed my brother.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Talk about terrifying. Outlast. Oh boy. Outlast is one of those games many people never finished because of how scary it is. In Outlast, you play as Miles, an investigative journalist visiting a hospital to make sure everything is, copacetic. And as you find out throughout playing the game, everything is certainly not copacetic. Everything is dimly lit, of course, but you are going around the hospital trying to uncover mysteries. Rumors of heinous patient experiments are going around, and Miles has to uncover them. As all this is happening, you run into many empty rooms that look like murder scenes, and even some dead-looking people. You are also given a camera to take pictures for your investigation, but the camera is your only source of light in the dark, adding another element of horror as all you have is a goddamn camera. And if that's not terrifying enough, the camera is also almost dead. So you are really worried that the camera will go out. Outlast is a terrifying experience, and while it got a sequel that was really scary, and not to mention the Outlast Trials, Outlast is a deeply unsettling experience. Frictional Games! Do they sound familiar? They are the studio behind Soma, and I said you'll hear their name again. Well, you're hearing their name again, and they are most well known for the Amnesia games. And none of those games are scarier than Amnesia Dark Descent. Set in 1830s Prussia, you play as Daniel, just simple old Daniel. And you play as Daniel roaming around a dark castle, only to find out that he has no memory of anything aside from his name and where he's from, meaning he has amnesia, hence the title, Amnesia. As all this is going on, Daniel is being hunted by some inhuman entity that is trying to do away with him. That would be all well and good if you were able to fight back against these enemies, and that's where the suspense and spookiness comes in, because in Amnesia Dark Descent, you can't fight back. All you can do is run and hide, and you never know when one will pop up, and when it does, and it catches you, the game's over. Throw that in with the ominous soundtrack and spooky setting, and you have the scariest game in a franchise that normally hits with being scary. It's here. I know you're expecting a Dead Space game. Now, which one to choose from? Well, Dead Space 2 is probably the better game, and I wouldn't be surprised if you guys expected me to talk about Dead Space 2, but I really believe the first game is scarier. In Dead Space, you play as Isaac Clarke, roaming around a spaceship with some truly terrifying necromorphs. While all this is going on, Isaac is also in a lot of pain, so while you are trying to fight off these necromorphs, you are also extremely vulnerable. The way you beat the necromorphs is by shooting their limbs off one by one, which, even though you are killing them, makes it feel a lot more suspenseful as you're doing it very slowly. And can I just say, that opening, holy shit, I don't have any words for it, so I'm just gonna play it.
I don't know, something's in the room with us.
Jesus! Open fire! Open fire! Linda, power! Linda!
Come on. Got it!
Isaac, get the hell out of there!
The door's unlocked! Run! Run, Isaac! Get the hell out of there!
Need I say more?
What kind of pencil do we take again?
Number 2. Take a number 2.
Looks like you took a big number 2.
Like Dead Space and Amnesia, I'm sure you expected a Resident Evil game to be on the list. And there are a lot to choose from. Even when the franchise went more action-heavy with games like Resident Evil 4 and Village, there were definitely some chilling moments, but the most chilling in the entire franchise has to be Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Or if you're in Japan, Biohazard 7 Resident Evil. It's so weird how they did that. This was a return to form for Resident Evil. I remember the franchise had everything going against it when this game came out, but what a way to return. Resident Evil 7 was the first Resident Evil game in first person, which was a bizarre change at first, at least at first glance, but after playing the game, now you know, this game is in first person because it is scarier that way. Everything that happens, every dark room you go into, every disgusting creature you run into, it's all the more terrifying because it's in first person. As for the story, in Resident Evil 7 you play as Lucas. Just normal old Lucas. He is on the hunt for his missing wife, but ends up running into the Baker family. And let me tell you, you don't want to run into the Baker family. And going off of that, if there's anything that makes this game so scary other than the first person perspective, it is the Baker family and how they put you into scenarios straight out of the fucking Saw movies. Resident Evil 7 has a bone-chilling story and a claustrophobic perspective and makes it one of the most terrifying games ever made, and definitely the most terrifying Resident Evil game.
I'm a Luigi, number 1.
Here it is, the #1 scariest game of all time. If you've been following along, you may have noticed that I have not mentioned Silent Hill yet. Any Silent Hill game. Well, I believe the scariest game of all time is a Silent Hill game, and it's none other than PT. Yep, some of you might not even agree that PT is a Silent Hill game, but I think it is, as it was a playable teaser, as that's what it stands for, playable teaser, for the, at the time upcoming, now unfortunately fucking cancelled, Silent Hill game, Silent Hills, plural. PT was meant to get you excited for Silent Hills, and oh boy did it get our hopes up. Getting our hopes up for Silent Hills, and never actually being able to play it, that is, because PT is fucked up in the best way possible. Throughout the whole game, it builds tension. The game plays out in a loop as you continuously return to the same hallway over and over and over again, and all the while trying to make your way through the house. While that is simple and maybe not even that scary on paper, what makes PT the most spooky is the atmosphere and the actual terror going on around you, with some small sounds slowly and quietly being heard around the house and some extremely disturbing visuals that will make you shit your goddamn pants. It is an absolute shame that not only did the game that PT was teasing get cancelled, but also because Konami fucking hates you, they delisted PT off of the PlayStation Store, and even if you downloaded it but deleted it, you can't re-download it. But even as a playable teaser, PT comes in as the #1 scariest game of all time. So that was my list of the top 15 scariest games of all time. I know you're not going to agree with me. In fact, this list was so hard, you could tell I made it into a top 15, and like, there were certainly many Resident Evil games, many Silent Hill games I wanted to include, but one game per franchise. But what do you guys think? What's the scariest game you've ever played? And do you agree with me? Be sure to like this video, come subscribe, or I will scare you to death. Bye!